The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Weeknights on GB News from 6 p.m. You'll always get drama.
Please stop, Michelle.
I know, yeah.
Please stop.
Should I just shut up?
Romance.
You like me, I like you. There you go.
There you are. Well, don't tell anybody.
Adventure.
Etc.
That's the whole point, but bomb.
And action.
Read my superstar panel. They're already at it. They're fighting. It's going to be quite a show.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship,
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
and no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often there will be difficult stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
It's 9:30 on Tuesday, the 8th of August. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News with me, Bev Turner, and Emily Carver this morning.
Yes, firstly, I'm scared of water. That's the excuse being used by some asylum seekers to stop them boarding the Bibby Stockholm, as only 15 of the proposed 500 migrants spend their first night on the controversial barge.
This comes as Home Secretary Suella Braverman launches a new task force to uncover what she's calling crooked lawyers. As reports surface, some are lodging false asylum claims for money, surely not.
And bad news if you're reliant on the bus. According to Labour figures, local bus routes are under threat. Statistics show the number of routes have decreased by 50% just over the last decade. Let us know if that impacts you.
Get involved with the show this morning, won't you? Email us in the studio. gbviews@gbnews.com is the address, as always. First, though, here is your very latest news.
Good morning. It's 9:31. I'm Ray Addison in the GB Newsroom. Our top story, a new task force to root out so-called dodgy lawyers has been announced by the government. Follows reports in the Daily Mail that solicitors helped an undercover journalist posing as an economic migrant to submit a false application in exchange for thousands of pounds. Home Secretary Suella Braverman says rogue firms are con men who must face the full force of the law. The number of bus services in the UK has halved since 2011. Labour found that there were nearly 9,000 in the year to March, down from nearly 18,000 then. However, the government says Labour's criticism is misleading, as it's invested £3.5 billion into bus services since 2020. A new report says Ofgem's energy price cap is costing people money and driving inflation. The Centre for Policy Studies says the limit has gone far beyond its original purpose of protecting customers, and the regulator is effectively stunting competition. The Department for Energy has stressed it's always working to protect households from sky-high bills. And a new study has found obese and overweight people's brains have different appetite control centres to those of people of lower weight. Researchers came to their conclusions after scanning the brains of more than 1,300 young adults across a range of BMI scores. Currently, almost two-thirds of adults in the UK are overweight or living with obesity. You can get more on all of those stories by visiting our website, gbnews.com. Now let's get back to Emily and Bev.
Very good morning.
Good morning. I'm delighted to be here with you.
I love it. You got the girl gang today. Get well, Andrew Pearce.
Yes, so straight to the news. 20 illegal migrants who were to be moved onto the Bibby Stockholm barge in Portland have actually had their transfers cancelled. That's after lawyers from a refugee group claimed they had mental health concerns and that some were scared of the water.
So only 15 were moved onto the barge yesterday, but there are plans for up to 500 men to eventually live on it at some point, maybe, eventually. Our reporter, Jeff Moody, asked children in Portland what they thought about it all.
No hate, no fear. Refugees are welcome here. Yeah!
Anyone doesn't agree?
I don't agree with it.
What don't you agree with?
Them all coming here. It's about a bunch of random men coming here. It's putting us in risk and it's putting our island in risk. Why are there no women coming here and it's all just men?
Why is there no women?
Where's the kids? If they're getting kicked out of their country, why aren't kids and women also getting kicked out? And why is it all men?
Yeah.
As well. Different people, like some people agree, some people don't.
It's
like a massive split.
And we're going to have to go in earlier because our parents are going to be worried for us. And they're going to make us... We've just been allowed out till 10. Now it's going to be 9:30 again.
Well, Dr. Susan Phoenix is a campaigner for No to the Barge. Good morning. What are your thoughts when you see the children in the area talking like that?
What do they say? From the mouths of babes. I think it's rather sad because I know those youngsters were brought in by a certain group that wanted them to all be in favour of giving flowers and goodie bags to the refugees. And of course, that didn't work. It's interesting because it reflects what people are feeling. There is a split, but the most of the split is for people that just do not want the barge here. It isn't against the immigrants per se. It's against the fact it's the wrong place for it to be. We don't have the resources. And also, we are a very poor area. I think I was just looking at some statistics I can't find now. But anyway, there's about 40% of poverty, especially in children and young people within our area. It's the social inequality thing. It's just not on that all this money is going to be spent on people from outside when we haven't fixed our infrastructure first. It's wrong. There's no common sense. And there is a lot of anger within the area at the government more than anything else.
Susan, I can certainly understand, I'm sure a lot of people at home can completely understand why you don't want this barge in your area. But the reality is that thousands of people are crossing the channel, and with the system as it is, they need to be put up somewhere. And if this is cheaper and more convenient and more safe and secure than hotel accommodation, is this just a case of not in my backyard, but it'll have to be put somewhere?
Yeah, no, definitely not, because it isn't going to be cheaper. I don't have the stats in front of me, but a lot of people now are doing a lot of sums. And when you see the patching job, I mean, really, to me, this is just an icon of government incompetence, another one, because the sums haven't been properly done. There is a lot of I found another thing not in my backyard the other day, but it's not in our uneconomic place for it to be put. It's the fact it is there, it's a small area, and it's dangerous with one road and one road off. We keep saying that. People think, oh, it's just a small town. It's an island, and it's very dangerous for anyone, including the people on the barge, for getting health and safety, fire engines, ambulances. I don't know who thought it up. The lack of common sense is just coming around and around every time. And there's no doubt it is Rishi Sunak wanting to get this done just so that he can look as if he's done something. But there are a lot more things that could be done. Why are we not using our military to build villages or tent camps for when they come off the boats? They should be processed at source. It's not good for people sitting around waiting for months. And why is it taking months? Why can we not train more assessors? It just seems to me nobody has really thought it through from start to finish. But also, we have to acknowledge there is a lot of money.
I guess, Susan, as we've watched this story over the last few weeks and months, and we've all got very familiar with the words, the Bibi Stockholm, it does appear to be perhaps, I think I'm in agreement with you very much, in that it is a visual sign of something being done. It's a very memorable name. Everybody's heard of the Bibi Stockholm now, and perhaps the government feel that they have to be seen to be doing something when they get thwarted every single opportunity, it seems, by the courts to take any sort of action in terms of deporting people to process them. So do you have some sympathy at all with the government in that they're trying?
They're very trying, aren't they? Sorry. No, I don't, because we have all of these people in positions of power, you know, and if they're trying, they're not trying hard enough. I actually blame the Home Office, who are the little spearhead travelling around the country, and I keep saying the word bullying. They are bullying local businesses, they are bullying local communities. And now I am ashamed to say I didn't realise just how many other places were suffering. And it is a case, in that case, not in my mind, and we don't until it affects us. I've now spoken to the people in the small towns and villages where the hotels have been taken over. In some cases, the immigrant population outnumbers the local village. That cannot be correct. It must cause social division.
Sorry to interrupt, you're a fantastic spokesperson for the No to Barge campaign, but it's quite interesting because looking at what people are saying at this time, now that the government have only managed to get 15 people onto this barge, which is quite ridiculous, really. 15, it's not very many at all. But a lot of people are saying, actually, they should get onto the barge. We need to make this barge happen. They should be even grateful to be on the barge after having travelled so many miles, and if they're in fear of persecution, etc., etc. So actually, there is quite a groundswell of support for the barge.
I'm not so sure. It depends where you speak. Certainly on our island, 99%, I would say, well, between 95 and 90% are against it. And it depends if it is in your backyard, of course, and in the right place. But here, the fact we have the security problems. And yes, anyone that has really suffered would be grateful to have a room on that barge. But these people, we don't know who they are. And again, the secrecy, there's no freedom of information. We don't know the proper costings. People have been applying for freedom of information from all kinds of organisations. And the fact is, it's costing a lot of money. And it's costing money that could be better spent. The homelessness on this island, I know a lot of those people would be quite happy to have a room on the barge. Yes, indeed. And perhaps one day it will be repurposed.
OK. Thank you, Susan. Dr. Susan Phoenix there from No to the Barge. Let us know what you think this morning, GBViews at gbnews.com. Let's go down to Portland now to speak to our Home and Security Editor, Mark White. Mark, only 15 people so far have made it onto the boat. Just remind our viewers why that is, and do we expect to see any more arrive today?
Some breaking news. I can confirm that 16 asylum seekers have now entered that barge. A bus in the last few minutes pulled up at Portland Harbour, and one Channel migrant got out and is making their way through security with a view then to going on to the Bibi Stockholm barge. It's painfully slow. I think you could have written the script well beforehand as to what was going to happen here. A number of late interventions by lawyers, human rights charities and other representatives of these channel migrants saying that for a variety of reasons it would be cruel and inhumane to put these people on board this barge. And now, having put in these interventions, they've advised 20 asylum seekers, those representatives have advised them not to go on the buses to head to the BB Stockholm, and 20 people did not get on the buses yesterday. Now, they have been served with another notice, another letter from the Home Office warning them effectively that they have until the end of today to get on the barge, and if they don't, then the Home Office has offered them accommodation, and there is a threat there that they will no longer receive Home Office support. In other words, they may be destitute and homeless, and I'm not quite sure how the Home Office would stand on that, because it's required by law to ensure that asylum seekers are not destitute. Perhaps there's a case in law that they can argue that they have offered accommodation, that offer has not been taken up, and therefore they're, within their rights to withhold support. But in arguing that, of course, it's going to go to further litigation, and it's just going to drag this whole process out, not for days, but weeks, potentially months.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Well, bring us any updates if that number becomes 17 or 18 or 19. Do let us know.
It's very interesting what the government are saying. They're essentially saying, well, the Home Office, if you don't get onto this barge, well, you can be homeless. Get on the barge. It's that or nothing, essentially, which I think a lot of people will actually agree with.
Yes, but it's just comedy, isn't it? Well, in the studio now is Conservative MP for Rayleigh and Wickford, Mark Francois. Mark, it's like satire, this whole situation, isn't it? You just can't believe how terrible it is. And then we've woken up this morning with Suella Braverman saying that she would offer a life sentence to any lawyers who try to fool the system, basically. That's a ridiculous thing to say as well, isn't it? Aren't they just, as it becomes more and more chaotic, it feels like the rhetoric from the government is becoming more and more ridiculous.
Well, let me start by paying tribute to one person who's my friend and colleague on the Defence Select Committee, Richard Drax. He's the local MP that's, inherited this.
Great man, we've had him in the studio.
Yeah, and he's worked incredibly hard on this to get the facts, to hold the Home Office to account. So I think Richard is doing everything he can as a local MP and should be commended for his efforts. On the wider issue, look, this is a barbaric and illegal trade. And the people traffickers who practice this, let's be honest, they care not one jot what happens to these people. They just want the money. And unfortunately, some people have drowned mid-channel. It is, after all, the busiest shipping lane in the world. So to cut the Gordian knot on this, we have to say, what do we do to stop those boats from leaving in the first place? You can argue about where you put those people, and at the end of the day, even if the barge was full up, in full flow on a summer day when the channel is calm, that's one day's worth. So ultimately, you have to stop people from coming, and that means at the end of the day, and I speak personally in saying this, we have to derogate from the ECHR and tell the Strasbourg court to keep out of this, because otherwise we'll be tied up in legal knots for years.
It's interesting you say that, because I think a lot of people are tearing their hairs out at this moment, thinking, how on earth can a refugee charity like Care for Calais essentially just put the block on this very simple policy that the government are trying to implement? Only 15, now 16, that's the breaking news, 16 people have now got onto this barge, yet it should be hundreds, 500 is the number that should be on the barge, and yet these legal challenges, how are they allowed to scupper such a simple policy?
Look, I'm not a lawyer, but my constituents in Rayleigh and Wickford, I'm sure many people across the country, they're struggling to pay their gas bills, their mortgage may have just gone up. They look at this on the news, on the television, and they can see some lawyers gaming the system. It's perfectly obvious what's going on. I mean, if you've gone across the channel illegally in a dinghy, to then say that you're scared of water is just palpably risible. Right? So people are legally gaming the system and the whole of the public can see it. So what do? You have to cut to the chase and stop people coming in.
So, Mark, do you agree with Suella Braverman's rhetoric there then? Or her idea that these people, these lawyers, should, well, have a life sentence? Do you think that's correct?
I go further. I think we're in this mess, and it is a mess, because we allowed the Strasbourg court to interfere. If you look at the prisoner voting issue a few years ago, where they attempted to interfere, some would argue beyond their remit, when Cameron was Prime Minister, we just said, this is none of your business, we're not doing it. And in the end, the Strasbourg court backed down, and that's what we should have done. On the illegal migration bill, we could have legislated to carve out that channel scenario from the competence of the court. We didn't do that, although privately some people think that's what Suella Braverman wanted to do. But we're now waiting for a Supreme Court judgment, a UK Supreme Court judgment. We may not get it till Christmas because of judicial recess and other legal technicalities. So we're going to have another summer's worth of this. Tens of thousands more people, right? Rishi Sunak said he would stop the boat. Well, he hasn't stopped them yet.
He hasn't even filled that one. He's only got 16 people on it.
So what we need to do is to focus on the main issue, which is how do we get flights going to Rwanda? How do we persuade people there's no point paying €10,000 to a people trafficker, because if you get to the UK, you won't be allowed to stay. We need to focus on the heart of the problem, and that means telling the ECHR where to get off.
But the frustration, Mark, is £170,000 per person to get them to Rwanda. That's what the costing looks like. Surely when we hear this, it sounds like we've given up on stopping them leaving the shores in France.
We can't. The Prime Minister said he would stop the boats. 3 words, absolutely categoric. So we're going to have to stop them. And
Mark, what are we paying £500 million to the French for over the next 3 years? Well, if it's not to stop the boats, what are we paying for?
Well, I think that's a really good question, although I think Macron is struggling to run his own country, let alone to patrol the French coast.
Then we shouldn't have given him £500 million.
Do you know what?
I certainly think we should have got better value for that money. I completely agree with you.
In moments like this, you either laugh or you cry, because I do think this whole thing is making a mockery of our country. You have people who are furious. I mean, we had a video clip there, I think you saw it, Mark, of children down in Portland tearing their hairs out. They're angry, they don't feel like they're getting much from the government, they don't feel like potentially their prospects are particularly good, and then they see boatloads of single men complaining about accommodation.
Emily, don't misunderstand me. I'm not trying to change the subject from the Bibi Stockholm, because it's at the heart of it. But what we ultimately need to do, the only way you solve this problem is to stop the migrants coming. That's the only, that's what you have to do to kind of cut the Gordian knot. And the only way we do that is to tell a foreign court it is none of their business. The problem is some in the cabinet regard the ECHR as holy writ. And until we get past that problem, we're not going to solve this.
But we could do that. We could do that, but then the French will still let the boats leave from their shores, presumably.
Yes, but if anyone, who's being asked to pay €10,000 sees that, and word would get round that community very quickly, that the last few groups of people who got to the UK shores were then processed and rapidly flown somewhere else and couldn't stay in Britain, they'd stop paying the money.
At such extraordinary expense to the taxpayer, though. Does the deterrent have to be...
Yeah, but look at what we're spending now. Look at what we're talking about.
But the idea is that you have a large upfront cost and then hopefully boats. But we don't know for sure whether it will do that job. But I mean, we've got to try something.
But look, we're spending £6 million a day as it is.
I think it's 7 now.
They're coming in 7 million for cash. They're coming in their hundreds every day. A lot depends on the weather in the Channel. So lots more will come. We're not going to get a UK Supreme Court ruling much before Christmas. The fundamental heart of the problem is that the Strasbourg court is exceeding its authority here.
But the truth is that there's slim to no chance that we're going to remove ourselves from that court. And the Conservatives have, how many months left of being in government?
Well, there's a general election coming, and let's not prejudge it. What we could have done...
If you don't get this right, it's going to be very easy to prejudge it.
Rishi Sunak said he would stop the boats, right? So, look, what we need to do is to pass legislation to say, perfectly legally, that in this cross-channel scenario, the ECHR will not apply. Then we have freedom of action. If we don't do that, we'll carry on being tied up in legal knots for ages. That is the way through. But it would involve the Cabinet taking a decision that some of them don't want to take.
Well, yes, that policy is often framed as being of the headbanger variety. It really is, isn't it? People say, how could we ever leave the ECHR? That would remove all of our human rights.
I didn't say that. Emily, you're not listening to me. I didn't say we had to leave the ECHR, although Suella Braverman is on the record as saying she...
Yes, indeed.
No, forgive me, I didn't say that. I just said that we would legislate to say, in this one scenario, the convention will not apply. I didn't say we had to leave the whole thing. So
you don't think we need to?
Personally, on a purely personal level, I would be prepared to leave it, because I think the Strasbourg Court have gone way beyond what the convention was designed to do. But even if you don't agree with that, we could legislate just to say in this cross-channel scenario it won't apply. That would do it.
Well, let us know what you think at home.
Let me just... Do you know what? I was just thinking about that footage earlier of those local children at the port saying, we have to go home early now, we won't be allowed to play out late because our parents will think we're in danger. This is the problem with this absolute chaos of this making of this situation now. Division. More and more division. And to hear come out of that, there was sort of hate, really, from the mouths of those children to say, we don't want these people here, we don't like these people. Some immigrants to this country do an amazing job. This country has benefited from some immigration. The last 12 months, 600,000. People will say, it's too much. That's legal migration. But to hear that from children, I actually find that really disturbing. And that's this government's making.
Well, no, it's not as if we're not a generous people. I mean, we've taken in something like 200,000 Ukrainian refugees, mainly women and children, because their men have stayed to fight against Putin's illegal and barbaric invasion. So you can't say no one in Britain has ever been generous. Some people have had these Ukrainians staying in their families' homes for over a year now.
That's right.
Yeah. So in the right circumstances, our people historically have been prepared to be very generous. But the default position is, unless we do something different, even leaving aside the Bibi Stockholm, these people who are trafficked for money by heartless individuals are going to keep coming. So we can either bewail how awful it is, or we can do something about it. I'd rather we did something about it.
Mark. Right, Mark Francois, lovely to see you, as always. Right, still to come this morning, more on this issue about the migrants boarding the Bibi Stockholm. Some of them can't do it because they're frightened of water.
Yes, and some potentially bad news if you depend on the bus, but this is...
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Morning, I'm Alex Deakin, and this is your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. It's going to get a bit warmer over the next few days, but still on the cool side today, with a north-south split. Still and damp across the south, rain and drizzle has been trickling in. A murky old start to the day around the coast of South Wales and southwest England. That rain and drizzle is heading up towards the Midlands, and things clouding over southeast England and East Anglia too, with some light rain trickling in here at times this afternoon. Northern England, Northern Ireland, southern central Scotland, mostly a fine day. Just a few showers in the far northeast, where it's still quite breezy. Temperatures still mostly below average for the time of year, struggling to reach 20 Celsius. Now, there will still be some of that rain around this evening across parts of the Midlands, East Anglia and the southeast. Could even be the odd heavier bit of rain for a time, but it does tend to ebb away, and most places will be clear with light winds across central and
southern Scotland. Will be quite a chilly old night, actually. Temperatures well down into single figures in the countryside, and most places starting at 10 or 11 Celsius on Wednesday. But it is going to be a warmer day with a bit more sunshine around. We are going to see temperatures rising. Now, it will be quite cloudy, I suspect, tomorrow across Northern Ireland, with a little rain here, and quite murky again with mist and sea fog around the coasts further west. But many central and eastern areas will see some sunshine, and we are going to start to see temperatures rising as well, more widely over 20 Celsius on Wednesday and warmer still on Thursday.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Monday to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com? You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nana, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching. Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
It is 10 a.m. on Tuesday, the 8th of August. This is Britain's Newsroom with me, Emily Carver, and Bev Turner.
Good morning, thank you for joining us. So firstly, I'm scared of water. That is the excuse being used by some asylum seekers to stop them boarding the Bibi Stockholm. Only 15, actually 16, Mark White announced just moments ago, of the proposed 500 migrants spent their first night on the controversial barge.
That comes as Home Secretary Suella Braverman launches a new task force to uncover what she calls crooked lawyers. Reports surface that some are lodging false asylum claims for money.
And let us know if you are one of these people who is reliant on the bus and is being very underserved. According to Labour figures, local bus routes are under increasing threat, with statistics showing that the number of routes have decreased by as much as 50% over the last decade. Is that impacting you?
Yes, and what are your thoughts on potentially dangerous dogs being banned altogether? New research says an overwhelming majority of Brits want the American XL Bully breed banned, according to a new survey. Are dogs dangerous, or are there just bad owners out there?
I have a confession to make.
Go on.
I'm frightened of all dogs.
All dogs?
All dogs.
And how do you deal with that?
With a great deal of embarrassment, actually. I'm frightened. I've got better because my children, thankfully, have not inherited my fear of dogs. They love dogs, so I've had to become a little tougher around them. But when
I have a controversial opinion. I do think that there are some bad breeds and that you can be born a bad dog, but perhaps you disagree with me at home.
Yeah, let us know what
That's controversial.
We're going to be discussing that and a lot more as well this morning. First, though, here is Ray Addison with your very latest news.
Good morning. 2 minutes past 10. Here's the latest from the GB Newsroom. Our top story, a new task force to root out so-called dodgy lawyers has been announced by the government. It follows reports in the Daily Mail newspaper that solicitors helped an undercover journalist posing as an economic migrant to submit a false application in exchange for thousands of pounds. Home Secretary Suella Braverman described rogue firms as conmen who must face the full force of the law. The new unit will bring together regulatory bodies, law enforcement and other government departments. Lord Chancellor Alex Chalk told us no one's above the law.
Yes, I'm absolutely comfortable that those who breach their professional duties, who act illegally, should be convicted, punished and disgraced. I'm entirely comfortable with that. And indeed, there are various agencies, whether it's the Office of Immigration Services Commissioner, the National Crime Agency, the CPS, they should all be playing their part in rooting out illegal practice. Professionals should not have some kind of immunity simply because they're lawyers, and I speak as one myself. If they behave badly, if they behave illegally, they deserve to be held to account.
A haulage firm that's part of one of the UK's largest transport groups may be forced to shut down its site in Northern Ireland due to Brexit. GB News has seen a letter sent by Morgan McLernan to staff that blames the consequences of post-Brexit arrangements for possible redundancies. The company delivers to every major UK supermarket. The business community in Northern Ireland is still awaiting details about the Windsor framework that was signed in February. John Martin from the Road Haulage Association says hundreds of jobs could be affected.
If you're investing tens of millions of pounds in a business, you need clarity and surety, and that hasn't been coming from government. I think the concern is if they tell us the detail, everybody will realise that it's not what the Prime Minister promised. Well, in the Morgan McLaren group, you're talking about hundreds of jobs, but they're not the only company that's under pressure at the moment. A number of other haulage companies and manufacturing companies are already looking at the viability of their businesses in Northern Ireland.
The number of bus services in the UK has halved in the last 12.5 years. Labour found that there were nearly 9,000 in the year to March, compared to nearly 18,000 in 2011. The West Midlands has been the hardest hit, with 2/3 of routes cut. But the government says Labour's criticism is misleading, as it's invested £3.5 billion into bus services since 2020. A new report says Ofgem's energy price cap is costing people money and driving inflation. The Centre for Policy Studies says the limit has gone far beyond its original purpose of protecting customers, and the regulator is effectively stunting competition. The Department for Energy has stressed it's always working to protect households from sky-high bills. Retail sales slowed last month as wet weather meant consumers had no reason to restock their summer wardrobes. Figures from the British Retail Consortium found that sales increased by just 1.5%. That's down from 2.3% last July. Food, drink and homeware were the high street's best sellers. Meanwhile, total food sales increased by 8.4% as inflation eased slightly from its March high. A new study has found that obese and overweight people's brains have different appetite control centres to those of people with lower weight. The findings are based on brain scans of more than 1,300 young adults with a range of BMI scores. Currently, almost two-thirds of adults in the UK are overweight or living with obesity. Sinead O'Connor's family has invited people to line the Irish seafront to say a last goodbye this morning. The 56-year-old Grammy-winning artist was found unresponsive when police were called to her home in south-east London last month. The cortege will travel over the Bray seafront and continue past her former home in Montebello, where she lived for 15 years. A host of tributes flooded in upon news of the singer's death, including from stars such as Russell Crowe, Annie Lennox and Cyndi Lauper. This is GB News across the UK on TV, in your car, on digital radio and on your smart speaker by saying, play GB News. Now let's get back to Emily and Bev.
Good morning. Thank you very much for joining me and Emily this morning. We're going to read some of your emails now. You've been getting in touch this morning. John has said, how can the migrant crossers fear the water when they cross the channel on dangerous boats? And Stephen said, in my opinion, this government is useless. Every single Tory MP should be deselected at the next election by the electorate of the UK. Maybe then they will understand the people.
There is a huge amount of frustration at every angle, really, of what's going on. Yes, those refusing to get on the barge, the lawyers who are working as activists, some say, and then the government just being seemingly incapable of stopping what's going on. Yeah. Richard says the government and civil service are not fit for purpose. They're not doing what they're being requested to do. David, we need to leave the ECHR to stop the boats. That's the only thing that will work. It goes on.
It does. And Barry's saying again, why does the government not call in the Royal Navy to stop these boats mid-channel? They've trained for this. When is this training going to be implemented? Let us ask that question to our guest this morning. Stanley Johnson is with us. Good morning, Stanley. Thank you so much for joining us. Why can't the Royal Navy get involved, do you think, and stop the boats mid-channel?
It probably could, but that would require a political decision. I think that is the answer. And the government would have to say, we are going to stop them, we don't want them to come, and then it would have to square that with various international commitments. And I think the government isn't yet in that position, because we are bound by international law as far as the treatment of refugees and asylum seekers are concerned. Moreover, we've kind of got out of the EU concept here. It's a pity, because I think there was a chance when we were still in the EU, of course you'd expect me to say this, of having a kind of collective approach to this issue.
Well, I'm not sure about that, because you have countries within the EU who have a liberal perspective on this, and then other countries who completely want to shut the borders. So I'm not sure there would ever be an EU-wide cooperation to the extent that everyone agreed exactly how many migrants were allowed in each country and how many asylum claims.
Well, there was an EU, as it were, frontier, and that was monitored by something called Frontex, and there were various rules which said you have to be returned to the first country where you entered.
It didn't work very well, though, did it, Stanley?
Well, it certainly worked better than the present situation, that's for sure.
Stanley, I've heard you talk, in fact, you've hot-footed it from Jacob Rees-Mogg's house, where you were last night, but I've heard you talk with almost like a little bit of conflict that you have emotionally about this topic, given that you are the grandson of illegal immigrants, refugees, asylum seekers.
Not sure they were illegal.
Asylum seekers.
Put it this way. What was the story? My Turkish grandfather was a very senior politician whose life was being threatened, and he was warned, get your family out to safety. My grandmother, who was heavily pregnant with my father, arrived in Bournemouth in, I think, just September, beginning of, maybe in August 1909. She had my father on September the 4th, 1909. She died in childbirth, and he was brought up. Well, that doesn't quite make him an illegal immigrant, if you see what I mean, because they weren't. But I have great confidence. In fact, I should have said to Rees-Mogg last night, didn't you come from Wales? For example.
Oh, well, that's a ridiculous thing to say, Stanley. It's not exactly the same as someone popping on a boat from Albania, is it, really?
I don't know.
Or India?
Might have been.
Just thinking, given that your son was in charge of this for a fairly long time, do you think he was also slightly emotionally conflicted by the peril of wanting to live and find safety in another country, and therefore he took his foot off the gas on this?
Well, I think we all are. Just look around us. Just look around. I mean, this is about the most multicultural country as you can imagine. Now, go to America. Think of that. So yes, I think we're all conflicted on this. And when the word of illegal immigrants is used, it's a tricky word. These are people who have not had their asylum recognised. Now, what are we trying to do? We're trying to say we're going to block people who haven't got their asylum recognised. We prefer to see them have processed in a third country. What we're saying now is let's at any rate get people off to, well, we said Rwanda. We're waiting to see whether Rwanda works. Ascension's no good. I spent a bit of time in Ascension, not so long ago, and I tell you, it's not the place.
No, that's not. But then I'm just thinking, isn't part of the problem is that politicians, prime ministers, people like your son Boris, never have to live in the communities where too much immigration in such a short space of time has completely altered the complexion of their town, and therefore they can't relate to how important this issue is for people. Whether that's, I would say, legal or illegal immigration.
No, it's interesting thought. Of course, I was brought up, I still live there, the last 70 years in West Somerset. And the immigrants there are people who come from Cornwall, And,
yes, it's not exactly the same as, in a city, and of course up in Boston where we went not too long ago.
Yeah.
But you know what you said about people being conflicted, and politicians are conflicted about this. What we need is politicians with a bit of gumption, conviction, to actually make difficult decisions that may sound tough on the surface, but actually end up saving lives in the Channel, end up, preventing us from wasting huge amounts of money. We need politicians who are able to put aside the emotive arguments and actually, come to a plan. But I want to ask you about what Suella Braverman has been saying about crooked immigration lawyers. She says they must be rooted out and brought to justice. Yes, the majority of lawyers act with integrity, but we know some are lying to help illegal migrants game the system. Do you believe that's widespread?
I'm all for Suella Braverman taking a tough line. I think, talking toughness, I think if you can make the Rwanda policy work, it might have the deterrent effect which it's meant to have. It did work in Nauru. On the lawyer point, I don't think I'm going to risk saying I think there are lots and lots of corrupt lawyers. I don't think I'm just not qualified to say that. I don't have the evidence.
Let me ask you also this morning. Liz Truss is lettuce, let's say, is on the front page of the Daily Star this morning. This is about her PM resignation list. That the number she wants to give out 14 gongs for the basically one for every 3 days that she was in office.
Going, gong.
Do you think that's appropriate? Should she, because she was in office for such a short period of time, should she just have said, actually, I'm not going to give out any gongs?
Interesting point. Prime Ministers do have a way of having,
yes,
resignation. No, not even resignation. This was demolition on this list.
Yeah.
Demolition honours.
That's right. Demolition honours.
Very good.
Well, I think there is, in fact, a very, very strong case for taking a look, not just at the honour system, but taking a look at the whole composition of the House of Lords. I just think we've got to a stage where it can't go on as it is, and I would say Prime Ministers need to think very, very carefully before recommending additions.
Well, of course, Boris recommended you.
I can't tell about that. I have no idea.
You have no idea. Well, according to the reports, that he put you up for a knighthood, and Rishi Sunak said, you're not giving your dad a knighthood.
Nice thought. Would you know more than I've been abroad for 12 weeks.
Surely you discussed that over Sunday.
You must have done, Stanley.
Nice thought.
You must have done.
Nice thought. Happily, I've been out of the country for so long. These things go on, and sometimes I get an occasional have you seen the Times? Well, no, I've been in different parts of the world.
Would you have accepted it? If Rishi had okayed your son's gong, would you have said, yeah, I'll take that? I worked hard, I raised him.
Well, you know, I'm reminded of the, is it the fourth commandment? Honour thy father and thy mother, thy days may be long in the land that the Lord God giveth thee. I'd say, well, someone's making an effort to obey the fourth commandment. I might be wrong if it is the fourth. Someone will check this.
And Stanley, seeing as we have you here, I must ask you about Harriet Harman's comments. I don't know if you've seen them. She said that the 4 Conservative MPs who ruled Boris Johnson did mislead the Commons, carried out a heroic service. What do you make of that?
Well, I'll tell you something. I may not know much about lawyers, but I do think that Harriet Harman misspoke totally then, and I think that she should have, I think the legal word is recused herself right at the beginning, because anybody who read her, is the word tweet?
Yes.
Tweets and that sort of thing should have made it, it was absolutely clear that she was not...
You think it was a stitch-up?
Well, it was absolutely clear that she was not the person to chair that committee. Now, as to the opinions of the gentleman, the Conservative gentleman who decided to side with the majority, well, to create the majority, if you see what I mean, I don't have much to say for them. I think I'm going to leave it at that.
And so not heroic.
We've got to move on, but I've just got one more question. The front page of the paper last week said that your son was talking to ITV about doing I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here, following in your footsteps. Do you think he should do it?
He would have tremendous fun, absolutely tremendous fun. That's what I do. And the wonderful thing is, for 3 weeks, or 19 days in my case, no phone, nothing to write with, just a few thoughts, and the wonderful chance to talk to people like Becky Vardy and Amir Khan and Dennis Wise, Jenny McAlpine. I remember them all.
So you recommended, when you sat down having Sunday lunch,
he'll have tremendous fun.
Is he going to do it, do you think?
I very much doubt it.
He can't go in after Matt Hancock did, though, can he?
No. The embarrassment. Stanley Johnson, lovely to see you. Thank you for coming in this morning. Right, still to come, Labour releases figures showing that local bus routes in England have declined by 50% since 2010. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, Alex Deegan here with your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. It will warm up over the next couple of days. Today, a bit of a north-south split with dull and damp conditions in the south, something a bit brighter further north, but it's very windy in the far north thanks to this deep area of low pressure named Storm Hans by the Norwegian Weather Service, bringing some wet and windy conditions to Scandinavia. The low pressure affecting us isn't as intense. It's just making for a fairly damp day over parts of the Midlands, South Wales. And after a miserly start, it might get a little brighter in the southwest. That light rain and drizzle spreading to East Anglia and the southeast. Yorkshire, Lancashire, Northern Ireland and a good chunk of Scotland actually having a fine day, dry and bright, but it is very windy in the far northeast with gales at times across Shetland. Temperature-wise, well, high teens, low 20s at best. Now, the cloud and rain and drizzle could pep up a little bit through this evening. Could see some heavier bursts of rain across Essex and towards London for a time, but it all clears away. Most places become dry overnight. A stiff wind across the far northeast continues, but elsewhere the winds fall light. And it does turn quite chilly, actually, rural spots down into single figures. But most of us will have a warmer Wednesday, and for many it'll be a fine day too, with plenty of sunshine. Quite cloudy in West Wales and Northern Ireland, where there will be some light rain and drizzle at times. Quite cloudy also for parts of Devon and Cornwall, and clouding over in southwest Scotland. But many central and eastern parts staying fine. Turning a bit warmer tomorrow, warmer still on Thursday.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Weeknights on GB News from 6 p.m. You'll always get drama.
Please stop, Michelle.
I know, yeah.
Please stop.
Should I just shut up?
Romance.
You like me, I like you. There you go.
There you are. Well, don't tell anybody.
Adventure.
Etc.
That's the whole point. But Bond.
And action.
Sergeant would read my superstar panel. They're already at it. They're fighting. It's going to be quite a show.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views, and often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not
believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Good morning, it's 10:22. You're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Emily Carver this morning and Bev Turner. Now, thank you for joining us. The number of local bus routes in England has halved since 2011, with more than 8,000 services cut.
That's despite the Department for Transport saying the government has invested £3.5 billion since 2020 to back our buses. Where's it going?
I do not know. Well, the West Midlands has been the hardest hit region in England, and our reporter Jack Carson joins us now from Birmingham this morning. So just to explain a little bit more about this, Jack, how many buses... Oh, there's a bus going by as we talk. That one's not been cut, but how many have?
Well, in the last year alone, Bev, 2,000 buses, this Labour research estimates, aren't running services anymore. Looking back since 2010, they reckon it's a cut of around 50%, with more than 8,000 services slashed. Here in the West Midlands, they say it's the hardest hitting region. But of course, for communities all around the country, buses, for some people, are a lifeline. Of course, particularly those older people that may live out more in the countryside, more in the smaller towns across the country, of course, use the buses to go to the shops and go and see friends so they don't feel so isolated. So it is concerning that buses are being slashed, but of course the government do say that this data is misleading. They say that they're spending a lot of money. Of course, we know on New Year's Day they brought in that £2 bus cap, didn't they? That's been extended until October this year, but they're running a £2.50 single fare bus cap until November 2024. They say that's costing them £500 £500 million. Transport Minister Richard Holden says this is another cynical attempt by Labour to distract the British people from Labour's appalling record, they say, on public transport. They say that Labour's fare hikes are discouraging the bus use in London and say that the Conservatives are backing buses. But of course, when it comes to Labour in this research, this is all around their idea and their plan to reform the way that buses work in the UK, with allowing communities to take back control of their bus services, lowering the legal hurdles with franchising and lifting the legal ban on municipal bus ownership.
OK, thank you, Jack. Thank you very much. Well, joining us now this morning is Alice Ridley, spokesperson for the Campaign for Better Transport. Alice, what do you make of these numbers?
Well, unfortunately, we found exactly the same thing. We've done our own research over the last decade, and we found that buses have been cut quite substantially. And we know from speaking to passengers that buses have been cut, that services have been reduced, and it's a really, really big problem across the country.
Alice, the government says that these figures are misleading, that they've put £3.5 billion into bus services since 2020 alone. Is it the case that the government are chopping services that aren't being used enough?
The government have definitely put some money into bus services, which has been welcome. And your reporter mentioned the fares offer, which we very much welcome, which is helping cap single bus fares in England, which has helped bring some passengers back. But overall, there just isn't enough money out there for buses, which is resulting in buses being cut. And those are not buses that weren't being used necessarily. These are buses that were being used. We speak to people on a regular basis whose bus has been cut, with a bus which was well used, a bus which was regular, which has really impacted on their lives, which has prevented them from maybe getting to work or to getting into education, or just prevented them from getting into town to do their shopping. So these cuts are very real. They are happening. Yes, there has been some extra funding from government, but it just simply isn't enough, and it's not getting to the right places at the minute.
Alice, we all see often, I mean, you know, here in London, not as common, but there definitely is when you're outside of the city centre, empty buses. Sometimes you've got bumper to bumper, 5 buses in a bus lane, and there might be 2 or 3 people sat on each bus. Is there no more creative way that we can transport people without having to use huge vehicles at certain times of the day which have nobody on them?
I think there are always going to be, some routes where, unfortunately, aren't going to be as well used. But that doesn't necessarily mean that those 2 or 3 people on that bus don't need the bus, and there isn't necessarily an alternative for those people. So those people may be trying to get to work and they may not have another option. So while some buses are obviously very full and some buses are less full, but we do need to recognise that some people have no other option. So whilst we cannot, guarantee that every bus is going to be full to the rafters with every journey, even if the bus is half empty, it's still an important bus route. It's still serving providing an important service to the people that are on it. So we do need to balance that. Sometimes buses aren't going to be completely full, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're not needed or used.
I think it's a very difficult one for the government because, you can't keep completely cost-ineffective services running, even if they do help out a few people. But could you tell us a little bit about how much this is actually impacting people on the ground? Because I can imagine in large swathes of the country it is very, very, very difficult to get around if you don't drive.
Yes, and of course what we have to remember, this is not a small minority of people using buses. Buses are a very, used by millions of people every day. They're our most used form of public transport, and around a fifth of UK households do not have access to a car, so we're completely reliant on public transport. So it's not a small minority of people using these things. They're extremely important. They're extremely important to the economy. Without buses, people can't get to work, can't get into education, they can't use services, they can't go shopping. So there's an element that, we're paying back into the economy and we're keeping the economy moving. And unless we can keep the country moving, getting people where they need to be, the economy will struggle and will suffer. So buses are hugely important, not just to the people to use them, but to people who don't use them. And another thing that buses do is they reduce congestion. They stop, they reduce the number of cars on the road. So buses are helpful to car drivers as well.
We've come a long way, haven't we, since the days, I think it was Margaret Thatcher said that anybody that over the age of 25 that finds themselves on a bus should consider themselves to be a failure. I mean, that phrase now, I mean, that's so extraordinary, really, to think that that's how we used to think about buses. And that was only the 80s, I think she was saying that, late 70s.
Yeah, and I think, unfortunately, that kind of attitude has kind of prevailed, and which has meant that buses are viewed as, you know, something for poorer people, for old people, for young people before they learn to drive, you know, something that's kind of a second-class form of transport. And that just isn't the case. A lot of people are choosing not to drive now. A lot of people can't afford to drive. A lot of people can't drive for whatever reason. And we cannot just kind of cast those people to one side and say they don't count. You know, buses are extremely important, and we need to maintain a good bus service, not just for the people who use it, but for the rest of the country and for the economy.
Yeah, Alice, thank you.
Thank you very much indeed.
Spokesperson for Campaign for Better Transport.
I used to get the bus all the way from a night out all the way home. It'd probably take about an hour, 15 minutes at about 1 a.m. in the morning after a night out. Probably a little bit dangerous, actually, thinking about it now.
You survived.
As a single woman, single girl.
Quite a nice little nap time, I'd have thought.
Then you end up at the bus station.
But it is liberation, particularly for teenagers. Like my 14-year-old daughter now, she can't believe that she can jump on and off buses and get around on her own, and that's wonderful. Like, that's, in terms of growing up, it's brilliant. You all been getting in touch as well. Migrant barge issue. John has said, we've read that one. Richard said the government and the civil service are not fit for purpose. They're not doing what they're requested to do. And Leon has said migration in this country is deliberate and orchestrated. Bibi Stockholm, I believe, is in addition to hotels and holiday camps to warehouse our guests with ESG on the forefront and digital IDs looming. It's hard to think our nation.
Ooh, a little bit of conspiratorial thinking there. From Leon.
I don't see it as conspiratorial, Leon. I see you just joining the dots. I just see you as having a very open mind to what might be going on, which we all need to have at the moment.
Well, it is, you know, staggering that they haven't been able to deal with it yet.
Right, we're going to be next joined by Dawn Newsroom and Nigel Nelson in the studio to debate the top stories of the day.
But first, let's get the news with Ray Addison.
Good morning. 31 minutes past 10, our top story. A new task force to root out so-called dodgy lawyers has been announced by the government. It follows reports in the Daily Mail that solicitors helped an undercover journalist posing as an economic migrant to submit a false application in exchange for thousands of pounds. Home Secretary Suella Braverman says rogue firms are con men who must face the full force of the law. A haulage firm that's part of one of the UK's largest transport groups may be forced to shut down its site in Northern Ireland due to Brexit. GB News has seen a letter sent by Morgan McLernan to staff that blames the consequences of post-Brexit arrangements for possible redundancies. The company delivers to every major UK supermarket. The number of bus services in the UK has halved since 2011. Labour found that there were nearly 9,000 in the year to March. That's down from nearly 18,000 in 2011. However, the government says Labour's criticism is misleading, as it's invested £3.5 billion into bus services since 2020. And a new study has found that obese and overweight people's brains have different appetite control centres to those of people of lower weight. Researchers came to their conclusions after scanning the brains of more than 1,300 young adults across a range of BMI scores. Currently, almost two-thirds of adults in the UK are overweight or living with obesity. You can get more on all of those stories by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
A quick look at the markets. The pound will buy you $1.2746 and €1.1605. Price of gold, £1,517.70 per ounce. And the FTSE 100's at 7,537 points.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News, investments that matter.
Right, next we'll hear from the Road Haulage Association in Northern Ireland. They've told GB News the Windsor framework simply is not working.
This is Britain's Newsroom with Bev and Emily this morning on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us. From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com? You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, no, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Good morning, it's 10:37. You're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Bev Turner and Emily Carver this morning.
You are indeed. Now, is the Windsor framework, established to replace the Northern Ireland Protocol, actually working?
Well, Morgan McLernan, a major haulier company, has sent letters to staff to open a consultation period around the closure of its only site in Northern Ireland.
The letter blames post-Brexit arrangements for damaging the company's bottom line.
The Road Haulage Association in Northern Ireland has told GB News it's the latest evidence that the Windsor framework is not working.
Late yesterday afternoon, we were informed that Morgan McLernan, part of a bigger group of companies, the Cleaner Group, are in the process of consulting staff with a view to closing the business down within Northern Ireland. Well, it's a combination of things. Logistics is a very finely balanced business. Small profit margins, high volumes, high cost. Any disruption to that market will tip it in the wrong direction. Well, as I said, the Morgan McLernan business is part of the Cleaner Group, and they're obviously looking at it from a UK or a European perspective. There's no indication that they're going to close any part of their business in GB or Europe, so they've seen probably the Northern Ireland business as a business that they're not making sufficient return on. The Prime Minister sold the framework document as solving all the problems for Northern Ireland in relation to the protocol. It hasn't delivered what was promised. In actual fact, a lot of people would say that it's more onerous than what the protocol was. Information has been slow coming from government. We're currently engaging with them on a weekly basis to get better clarity. That clarity hasn't been forthcoming. If you're investing tens of millions of pounds in a business, you need clarity and surety, and that hasn't been coming from government. Well, in the Morgan McLaren Group, you're talking about hundreds of jobs, but they're not the only company that's under pressure at the moment. A number of other haulage companies and manufacturing companies are already looking at the viability of their businesses in Northern Ireland. Well, certainly my main concern would have been more so with the smaller haulage companies. However, as we've seen from the Kalina Group, it's also the large companies that are finding it difficult to trade. Yes, I would say that the market will change considerably, both in relation to the haulage companies and in relation to manufacturers who are based both in GB and in Northern Ireland.
Well, that's bad news for Rishi Sunak. It's one of his things he's been bragging about, actually, is he got the Windsor framework right. If that starts to crumble, that's not good news at all for the Conservatives. Right, we are joined in the studio now by Dawn Newsroom and Nigel Nelson. We like to think you're our Ken to our three Barbies today.
The honorary male.
Yes, channel your Kenergy today. Channel your Kenergy.
Come on, do the Matt Hancock dance. Come on, you know you want to.
What's the Matt Hancock dance?
Is this?
It was so embarrassing that we ought to see it.
Yeah, let's not mention that man, otherwise, as you know, the steam starts to come out of my ears. Suella Braverman, Dawn Neeson,
yes,
waging war against the lawyers that she says are crooked and saying that they should have a life sentence.
This is the front page of the Daily Mail, and the lefty lawyers. I don't think Suella can actually say the word lawyer without putting the word lefty in front of it. Can't blame her, to be fair. Yeah, she is waging war on the migration lawyers. It's been a big Mail investigation. They've done a sterling job.
And they've done a brilliant job.
They have done a brilliant job, OK, but Suella is saying, no, we were working on this before the Mail got involved as well. So this is something called the Professional Enablers Task Force. It's training frontline immigration staff to identify and report suspect activity with claims from asylum seekers being processed by lawyers who might have ulterior motives, i.e. making a load of money and telling lies. So some lawyers, not all, some are very good obviously, have been found to be encouraging, coaching asylum claim migrants, basically, to claim sexual torture, beating, slave labour, and they're even helping them get antidepressants, Bev, to prove their cases. It's like, you know, your mental health's been affected, so...
And this was secret camera work, wasn't it,
yes,
that the Mail did?
the Mail have done that, yes, absolutely.
And as I understand it, 3 law firms have now been closed as a result of this investigation.
Good, and there will be many more. Now, there's a big meeting going on today with Alex Chalk, the Lord Chancellor, as well. But the problem I have is the Immigration Act from 1971 said that assisting unlawful immigration to the UK carries life imprisonment. None of this is new. So we're having this conference today where they're getting...
It happened at his time in government. They ruled it out, but it would cost £1 million per migrant, so that wouldn't work. They've tried all sorts of mad things. They've thought about uninhabited Scottish islands. But again, you have to build the infrastructure there to make it work. It becomes terribly expensive. So at the moment, it seems to be the government are desperately looking for gimmicks, which I think that the Bibby Stockholm is another example of a gimmick.
But hang on, that's because they can't get their deterrents to work because they have so many legal challenges. Of course, the opposition isn't on board. You know, they are trying to be fair to them.
Well, I don't think they're trying to be terribly fair, but I mean, when it comes to the lawyers, Dawn's absolutely right, that if a lawyer acts illegally and tries to make an asylum seeker lie on a document to try and get asylum, that lawyer should at the very least be struck off, at the most go to jail. I agree with that totally, but we're confusing a load of different lawyers here. Those are crooked lawyers. When it comes to lawyers who are challenging decisions within the law, that is their job.
Oh, yes.
So what do we make of the latest one, then? The lawyers have blocked 20 asylum seekers from getting on the Bibby Stockholm because claiming they have a fear of water. They came over here on boats across the Channel.
Yeah, but if they've actually seen people drown, they may well do. But again,
that's why it works, isn't it? Because there is that,
But it is the lawyer's job to challenge something like this, especially if you don't believe that we should be offshoring asylum seekers either 4 feet off Portland Port or 4,000 miles to Rwanda.
Well, the government has said if you don't get on the barge, then essentially, well, it's the barge or nothing. is what they're saying. And I think that goes down quite well with a lot of the public who are looking at the barge and thinking, doesn't look that bad.
Yeah, but what do they mean, nothing?
But what do they mean? That means that they're just going to stay in a hotel, though, doesn't it? That means that they continue to stay in the hotel at the taxpayer's expense. It doesn't mean they're literally going to let them go free and walk on the street.
No, and we don't want that either, of course, because that would be a safety risk.
So it's not,
to themselves and to the communities.
I mean, they are allowed out. I mean, you're not actually imprisoned if you're an asylum seeker. You're in on the boat. They'll be able to come ashore, go on buses into town.
But the argument against that is, I mean, I totally agree. It's not a prison ship. Obviously, it sounds much better than a lot of people live in this country. But the argument against that, it is a prison ship because they have to be escorted through the port, so they're not allowed to get off at will. They have to have an escort. So in theory, it's not their choice as to when they get on and off.
Shall we do a bit of ULEZ?
Yes, let's.
It's a very controversial topic, Nigel. This is one of your stories. Front page of the Daily Telegraph. Tory... Oh, yes. Well, it's dozens of MPs tell Sunak they fear 2026 move could be ULEZ for rural communities.
Yes, I mean, what they're talking about is changing oil boilers over to heat pumps. George Eustace, the former Environment Secretary, is saying that this works out as a kind of ULEZ for the countryside.
Ah, right. So it's not really ULEZ.
It's not about ULEZ.
It's not a ULEZ, no.
We can only go on the information that we're given here.
This is the ban on new oil boilers, which comes in 3 years' time. And the problem here all the way through is that you've got MPs now saying, oh, the election's coming, people don't like the idea of paying for net zero. And the difficulty is we're not going to get there, that if we keep opposing each single measure that comes up, getting to net zero is going to be really difficult. And we've had the worst kind of climate changes this year. It's been, June was the record hottest month ever. We had the hottest day ever in July. You've had Antarctic ice melting at the rate of 10 times the landmass of the UK.
Nigel, this is what people do. They give these statistics about the global temperature and the weather we've experienced and climate change, and then they say that means we have to get rid of our gas boilers. And a lot of people are thinking, OK, if we all got rid of our gas boilers tomorrow, well, would that change the global temperature?
Well, if we don't all act together, it's a global problem. So
but we're not acting together. That's the issue for people.
Well, indeed it is. I mean, obviously, a small change in China, as the Chinese don't and never cease to remind us, would do more for the climate than a big change in Britain. I take that point on board. But the whole thing is that if we don't all pull together to deal with climate change and go for the net zero target of 2050, nothing's going to change.
Sounds a bit kumbaya to me. A little bit idealistic.
Well, I mean, the whole thing is it's whether you believe in it or not. If you believe that climate change is actually a man-made phenomena, we've got to do something about it.
In terms of generating power for our houses, Dawn, it still beggars belief for me that every new house that is built, every single new house, I mean, not that we're building that many, but every new house that was built should have some facility to generate their own electricity. Every single one should have solar panels on the roof.
Of course, yes.
Not necessarily to save the planet, because I'm also a little bit convinced about the impact that man is having if you look at the climate change over the thousands of years rather than just in our lifetime. But I like the idea of people being self-sustainable and having solar panels on the roof.
Solar panels,
their water.
fully insulated, all of these
all about the
things.
insulation.
All of these things apply, and all the houses that we're not currently building should have these things. And I don't understand why it's a problem. Because not only will it save the planet, in inverted commas, but it will get people's fuel bills down. And stop us being reliant on countries like China and Russia, which, as we know, is a huge security risk. So it makes perfect sense.
I think you've just outlined Labour policy, actually, on this one.
But really?
They're talking about the whole idea is insulation.
Oh, that policy, that was yesterday.
Dawn, let's have a look at this ridiculous, unbelievably ridiculous story that The Guardian are leading with today. That air pollution is linked to a global rise in resistance to antibiotics.
Bev, how dare you say it's a ridiculous story? It is, frankly, a ridiculous story. This is the front page of The Guardian. And the headline, I mean, Nigel and I got 300 years of Fleet Street between us. The headline, air pollution linked to global rise in deadly resistance to antibiotics. What does that even mean? It means nothing, by the way.
It's not a very punchy headline, is it?
It's not very Christmas sexy and full of of impact, it has to be said. But this is The Guardian, what do we expect? In any case, there are paragraphs and paragraphs about air pollution killing us all, antibiotics, we're all becoming resistant to antibiotics. And this is a study that has originated from China. Anyone hearing alarm bells there? Absolutely.
Unreliable science.
Exactly. And they go on about the size of our particles, da-da-da-da-da. But there's one paragraph that actually makes sense. And this study from China did not actually look at the science as to why these two, i.e. global rise in antibiotic resistance and climate change, might be linked. One paragraph destroys.
So, in other words,
whole
that
story.
resistance to antibiotics could be related to something completely different.
How did that get the lead? I can't believe that got the lead, the front page. Sometimes
Well, we
do
both
question.
read the story and came to a different conclusion at the end of it about what it meant.
Well, what did you think
I
it means?
thought it meant that air pollution means that antibiotics are becoming more resistant, and then we don't get the connection about why that should be so. But that's what it seemed like.
That's kind of what you need, though, isn't it?
I think, was
we need to know why.
I know.
Exactly, and the paragraph is that we don't know why. This is all.
May I just say one thing? I hope we've got time, but I don't know if you've seen, but Sadiq Khan, this is a actual ULEZ story, and it's linked to the air pollution and, of course, to net zero policies. He says that ULEZ will actually be good for tradesmen, so your local plumber, construction worker, etc., because it will stop them from having to take days off for the asthma they may suffer from. What? So he's saying that ULEZ is in their best interests, even though you've got the Confederation of British Builders saying that's absolute nonsense. When was the last time your plumber took a day off because he had asthma?
If you
answer that one.
Well, it's a rather convoluted way of getting there, but the whole point is ULEZ would improve the atmosphere.
Yeah, but
so
to
you
tell
would have
tradesmen...
you have less asthma, less heart disease,
Come on,
less lung
Nigel,
disease.
it's shameless.
I don't think that's... You know, if you have asthma, there are going to be other contributory factors to that, as opposed to...
I just wish Sadiq Khan would be honest.
Pollution.
This is nothing about air pollution. This is about saving TfL, who he bankrupted. It's about making money, sorry.
Yeah. Oh, do you know
Allegedly.
do you know who I would love to hear from? I'd love to hear from you if you're a plumber and you've had to have lots of days off because of asthma, and you think that if you didn't get in your white van to drive to your work, you wouldn't have to have as many days off because of your asthma. GBViews at gbnews.com. Let's see if you're genuinely out there. That would be brilliant. Daily Star, let's go to this, Dawn. Liz Truss
Shall we?
And her shameful gongs.
This was one of the best things. I mean, it's the lettuce, the limp lettuce that was Liz Truss. 49 days in office.
Has it won any awards yet, the limp lettuce?
I think it did win some awards.
I think
it did. I can't remember.
Yeah,
I think it did, yeah. And it was fun, and it was like, you know, red top tabloids being, you know, doing what they're put on earth to do.
Mischief.
But there is a serious story here, obviously. And basically, 49 days in office, and she's handed out, because retiring prime ministers can hand out gongs. So she's handing out 14 of them, and that is an honour for every 3 days she was in number 10.
I'm all right with that. I can't lie, I'm all right with that, because
you wouldn't turn it down.
No,
you'd be Dame Bev.
But do you know what? I'd take it. I'd definitely take it. No, but the point is, these are people who helped her on her political journey for many years, funders of her campaign. I'm all right. Can you imagine what the blokes? If a bloke was in power for 49 days, they'd have pushed through. Look what Boris Johnson did.
I know exactly, and that's why these things should be abolished. There shouldn't be a resignation on it.
Well, that I can also.
Well, that's the thing. You either get rid of it, or you let Liz Truss have her
that's
gongs
probably
to
right,
dish
but
out.
I think get rid of it. The whole point is, if you're putting people in the House of Lords, you want the right people to go there. They're legislators. They make laws that we have to obey. Therefore, choose the right people. Just don't do it as a reward.
Although it is quite funny that apparently people have been turning down her gongs
Two of them
because they're too
turned down.
embarrassed.
Yeah, two of them turned it down. I mean, because it's like, really, I'll take from someone else, but not you. But Bev, obviously, Dame Bev, I like. But the one person she's studiously ignored is her partner in crime in all of this, Kwasi Kwarteng.
Yes.
Who was helping her with the trustonomics.
Yes,
Well,
she did not give him any credit at all, did she?
Right, well.
Thank you both. Right, let me look at what you've been saying. Mike has said, what do you think would happen to the level of immigration if all asylum claimants had to have their DNA, fingerprints and photo taken and recorded on a central database in order to start an asylum claim? Let me take that to you, Nigel, briefly. Would you be in favour of that?
Having the DNA taken?
Yeah, and their fingerprints and photo taken on a central database.
Yeah, I don't see any problem with that. I mean, if they're coming into this country and they're to live here...
Nigel, we'll have to come back to you because we have come to the end of the hour. And we'll be back in just one moment. Keep your views coming in.
Anyway.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, Alex Deacon here with your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. It will warm up over the next couple of days. Today, a bit of a north-south split with dull and damp conditions in the south, something a bit brighter further north, but it's very windy in the far north thanks to this deep area of low pressure named Storm Hans by the Norwegian Weather Service, bringing some wet and windy conditions to Scandinavia. The low pressure affecting us isn't as intense, it's just making for a fairly damp day over parts of the Midlands, South Wales. And after a miserly start, it might get a little brighter in the southwest. That light rain and drizzle spreading to East Anglia and the southeast. Yorkshire, Lancashire, Northern Ireland and a good chunk of Scotland actually having a fine day, dry and bright, but it is very windy in the far northeast with gales at times across Shetland. Temperature-wise, well, high teens, low 20s at best. Now, the cloud and rain and drizzle could pep up a little bit through this evening. Could see some heavier bursts of rain across Essex and towards London for a time, but it all clears away. Most places become dry overnight. A stiff wind across the far northeast continues, but elsewhere the winds fall light. And it does turn quite chilly, actually, rural spots down into single figures. But most of us will have a warmer Wednesday, and for many it'll be a fine day too, with plenty of sunshine. Quite cloudy in West Wales and Northern Ireland, where there will be some light rain and drizzle at times. Quite cloudy also for parts of Devon and Cornwall, and clouding over in southwest Scotland. But many central and eastern parts staying fine. Turning a bit warmer tomorrow, warmer still on Thursday.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Weeknights on GB News from 6 p.m. You'll always get drama.
Please stop, Michelle. I know, yeah. Please stop. Should I just shut up?
Romance.
You like me, I like you. There you go.
There you are. Well, don't tell anybody.
Adventure.
Etc.
That's the whole point.
And action.
Sergeant Reed, my superstar panel, they're already at it. They're fighting. It's going to be quite a show.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prisons?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed. So I guess they've always been quite woke. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in their home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Good morning, it's 11 a.m. on Tuesday the 8th of August. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Bev Turner and Emily Carver.
It is indeed so. Firstly, I'm scared of water. That's the excuse being used by some asylum seekers to stop them from boarding the Bibi Stockholm. Only 15 of the proposed 500 migrants, 16 actually, spent their first night on the controversial barge.
In the meantime, Home Secretary Suella Braverman has launched a new task force to uncover what she calls crooked lawyers. This is thanks in no small part to the work that the Daily Mail did to expose that some people are lodging false asylum claims for money.
Yes, and what are your thoughts on potentially dangerous dogs being banned altogether? New research says an overwhelming majority of Brits want the American XL bully breed completely banned. That's according to a new survey. Are dogs dangerous, or are there just bad owners out there? Age-old question.
We'd love to know what you think as well this morning. Thank you for messaging in and saying how much you're enjoying having Emily here at this time of the morning. Get well soon, Andrew Pearce. First of all, though, here is your very latest news with Ray Addison.
Thanks, Bev. Good morning. 1 minute past 11, our top story. A new task force to root out so-called dodgy lawyers has been announced by the government. It follows reports in the Daily Mail that solicitors helped an undercover journalist posing as an economic migrant to submit a false application in exchange for thousands of pounds. Home Secretary Suella Braverman is describing rogue firms as con men who must face the full force of the law. The new unit will bring together regulatory bodies, law enforcement and other government departments. Lord Chancellor Alex Chalk told us no one is above the law.
Yes, I'm absolutely comfortable that those who breach their professional duties, who act illegally, should be convicted, punished and disgraced. I'm entirely comfortable with that. And indeed, there are various agencies, whether it's the Office of Immigration Services Commissioner, the National Crime Agency, the CPS, they should all be playing their part in rooting out illegal practice. Professionals should not have some kind of immunity simply because they're lawyers, and I speak as one myself. If they behave badly, if they behave illegally, they deserve to be held to account.
A haulage firm that's part of one of the UK's largest transport groups says it may be forced to shut down its site in Northern Ireland due to Brexit. GB News has seen a letter sent by Morgan McLernan to staff that blames the consequences of post-Brexit arrangements for possible redundancies. The company delivers to every major UK supermarket. The business community in Northern Ireland is still awaiting details about the Windsor framework that was signed in February. John Martin from the Road Haulage Association says hundreds of jobs could be affected.
If you're investing tens of millions of pounds in a business, you need clarity and surety, and that hasn't been coming from government. I think the concern is if they tell us the detail, everybody will realise that it's not what the Prime Minister promised. Well, in the Morgan McLaren group, you're talking about hundreds of jobs, but they're not the only company that's under pressure at the moment. A number of other haulage companies and manufacturing companies are already looking at the viability of their businesses in Northern Ireland.
The number of bus services in the UK has halved in the last 12.5 years. Labour found that there were nearly 9,000 in the year to March, compared to nearly 18,000 in 2011. The West Midlands has been the hardest hit, with 2/3 of routes being cut. But the government says Labour's criticism is misleading, as it's invested £3.5 billion into bus services since 2020. A new report says Ofgem's energy price cap is costing people money and driving inflation. The The Centre for Policy Studies says the limit has gone far beyond its original purpose of protecting customers, and the regulator is effectively stunting competition. The Department for Energy has stressed that it's always working to protect households from sky-high bills. Retail sales slowed last month as wet weather meant that consumers had no reason to restock their summer wardrobes. Figures from the British Retail Consortium found that sales increased by just 1.5%, down from 2.3% last July. Food, drink and homeware were the high street's best sellers. Meanwhile, total food sales increased by 8.4% as inflation eased slightly from its March high. Students across Scotland are receiving their exam results today, with pass rates still higher than they were before the COVID pandemic. More than 140,000 young people are receiving their grades for national 4s and 5s, Highers and Advanced Highers. The results show a record number of passes in an exam year achieved at National 5. Education Secretary Jenny Gilruth says that while the pandemic disproportionately impacted young people from disadvantaged backgrounds, the exam results show there is much to celebrate. A new study has found obese and overweight people's brains have different appetite control centres to those of people of lower weight. The findings are based on brain scans of more than 1,300 young adults with a range of BMI scores. Currently, almost two-thirds of adults in the UK are overweight or living with obesity. Well, people are lining the Irish seafront to say their final goodbyes to Sinead O'Connor. Those watching now on television can see live footage of the crowd there gathered to pay their respects. The 56-year-old Grammy-winning artist was found unresponsive when police were called to her home in south-east London last month. The funeral procession will travel over the Bray seafront and continue past her former home in Montebello, where she lived for 15 years. A host of tributes flooded in upon news of the singer's death, including from celebrities including Russell Crowe, Annie Lennox and Cyndi Lauper. This is GB News across the UK on TV, in your car on digital radio and on your smart speaker by saying, play GB News. Now let's get back to Bev and Emily.
Good morning. Thank you for joining Emily and I this morning. So a government clampdown on crooked lawyers who teach illegal migrants to lie will face a dedicated task force and tougher sentences.
Yes, this task force will be made of regulatory bodies and law enforcement teams working with partners to tackle immigration abuse in the legal sector.
So let's now go to David Hay, human rights lawyer. David, good morning. Nice to see you again.
Hi, good morning.
What do you make of this suggestion that your industry needs a task force to wheedle out the wrong uns?
Hi, good morning to both of you. I mean, I think, this is, I was watching what Dawn said earlier, and this should already be done. You already have the police, the regulatory bodies, the Ministry of Justice, the Home Office, the National Crime Agency, and obviously people's own integrity and ethics that are professionals. Why do we need a so-called task force? But when you even look into what this task force means, it's essentially today that Suella Braverman is going to chair a meeting of interested bodies. I mean, it just seems another ineffective policy stunt to distract from that utter chaos in the asylum system at the moment.
But I couldn't agree more, and I feel like there is a lot of this going on at the moment. The more that the public become aware of how problematic the issue of illegal immigration is, it's like the higher the rhetoric and the more extreme the rhetoric from the government seems to be. But there is a problem, isn't there, as exposed brilliantly by the Daily Mail, actually, with lawyers who are working the system, are gaming the system, are lying to allow people to stay here who really do not have any legal claim to do so.
Well, absolutely. There's a significant problem in the legal industry, as in many other industries. Particularly within law. I mean, if any of your viewers and listeners now literally go onto Google and type in perjury school, they'll see a case that's going through the courts at the moment, where a leading international law firm and the head of white-collar crime has been accused of setting up a perjury school to coach witnesses in another case. So it's not just about immigration lawyers. There is a clear problem in the so-called justice system, and essentially, until it's up to the interest of people to do something about it, no one does.
This is something that people have been talking about for years. there have been allegations that there are lefty lawyers or just lawyers in general that are acting in a corrupt way, essentially inventing stories on behalf of their clients to allow illegal immigrants to stay in this country with bogus asylum claims. The Daily Mail managed to get 3 law firms closed with this scoop that they found. But how widespread is this practice?
I mean, in my experience and from what I've seen, it's very widespread. I mean, when I was a trainee lawyer, which is some time ago, even then, I saw immigration scams from universities. And so, that's a while ago. And like I said, it's nothing new. Suella Braverman is a lawyer. The Lord Chancellor is a lawyer. Many of the politicians are lawyers. They know the industry and the corruption in the industry, but nothing has been done effectively. And a task force and a few more meetings and some press statements is not going to change that.
David, you're a human rights lawyer. Now, some of these asylum seekers who don't want to get on the Bibi Stockholm have said that they can't go on there because they're frightened of water and their accommodation is clearly floating. Isn't that something that, well, first of all, 2 questions. How plausible is it that they can use that as an excuse to not have to get on there? But also, how did the government not see that one coming down the tracks?
I think you've hit the nail on the head. There are 2 issues there. First of all, the government should have seen these. And when I was mentioned earlier on another show last week about the fact that when you had the fire brigade union coming out and saying that this is unsafe, that was doors wide open for people to challenge people moving on to that because of that. So these were foreseeable things that should have been dealt with. Now the problem is that we've got the law that was passed by previous governments, which is the Human Rights Act, which enables these challenges. That's the problem that we've got. And in addition to that, we've got a justice system that is very, very slow. Aside from the dodgy lawyers and the corruption, it's very slow. It takes a very long time, which is why these asylum seekers get stuck, not just for days, but years and years and years. So unless that is changed, unless we speed up and invest in the justice system, invest in courts, make things faster, and then, as some people may say, change the human rights laws. I mean, I would disagree with that, but some people say that will help move these things along. You are going to get cases like that, because, of course, there will be genuine people that may have seen perhaps people drown when they're crossing the channel, etc., that are suffering because they're on there. But there will also be bogus ones exploiting that.
But how do you differentiate? Sorry to interrupt you, but how can you possibly differentiate? You can't. They could all be bogus. And that might be that only 16 people ever go onto that barge because they can all use that as an excuse. What happens to those people next? I mean, we were saying the government have said, well, this is your choice. It's either the barge or nothing. So then what for those people?
Well, that's the problem that you've got, and you've got to be able to differentiate. You've got to weed out the genuine cases, which there are some, from the bogus ones, and then add to that the dodgy lawyers and all the problems that you've got. You've got a real big problem, and then it's very, very, very difficult. And again, because of the laws we have. But one way to achieve it is to speed up the processing of the claims, to speed up and invest in the courts and the system that we have. So even if people are bogus, we can weed them out quickly, rather than it taking years and years and years.
Well, surely it is a step in the right direction that Suella Braverman is making these announcements. She's identified this problem and is trying to do something, at least on the surface level. I'm not sure it's fair to say it's just a distraction.
I mean, I would disagree with you on that, because I think, it's something that's needed to be done, but it's not new. It's not news. It's nothing new that there's been dodgy lawyers and the people that are holding this up, whether it's the gangs that are bringing them across, or the lawyers, or the slow justice system. It seems to me that it's just a bit of a distraction and playing to essentially win votes. It would be nice if they actually do something, put these policies and practices in place, and we see some results, and then issue a press release.
So, David, just to be really clear, if the rest of the asylum seekers who the authorities wish to put on the Bibi Stockholm all say, I'm frightened of water, and as you say, it's very hard to prove. What do you do? Stand them in a room with a full bath and see their reaction? Like, how do you prove that? Then that means there could be not one other person steps foot on that boat. They can all use that as an excuse.
In theory, yes, exactly. And because of where we are currently with the court system, where people are on summer breaks, even more delays. So that's why you're seeing, and I said a few days ago, like I said, I envisage people would be challenging being put on the boat on the basis of even the fact that the fire brigade union says it's unsafe.
Yeah. These lawyers are taking These lawyers are taking the mick. This is not what human rights law should be used for.
But this is
to prevent
law,
someone
though,
who's
isn't it?
taken a dinghy across the channel in treacherous conditions, maybe, put their lives at risk, and then refusing to go on a barge that happens to be floating on water because they're scared of water. It makes... Oh, it's infuriating.
But isn't it? But it's so interesting, though, isn't it? Because they aren't... Some, as we're talking about the dodgy lawyers, who definitely exist, but the ones who are claiming about the fear of water, they're not doing anything illegal, are they, David?
No, and I think that from my side as a human rights lawyer, one of the big issues I see with this is it's turning the public against the genuine asylum seekers that genuinely need help.
Very
because
true.
everyone's vilinising the word asylum seeker, so the genuine one that comes over is the one that's really suffering, and they're
Very
the people
true.
we need to protect, and that's one of the problems that we've got here.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. David Hay, human rights lawyer, thank you so much.
Goodness me.
It's fascinating, isn't it? Because he's right, and that's what upset me about that footage of the children saying we don't want them in our harbour. It does create division and hatred. And it does mean that some people who would be a benefit to this country, who might need to seek asylum...
Yeah, but Bev, if you cross by dinghy, you are taking advantage.
Yeah. I think that's probably... Oh, I don't disagree. They're all using clearly...
I'm with the kids. I think they've got a fair enough point.
Right, Mark White is in Portland. Hello, Mark. Hello, what's the latest down there? Looking a little grey and overcast this morning. A bit like... I imagine.
Yeah, I mean, it's days like today you really know you're by the sea. The wind is whipping up and we're just feeling the first spots of rain here. And we've had some more asylum seekers arriving on the barge. We can confirm now that 19 asylum seekers have arrived on the BB Stockholm since yesterday, 15 yesterday, of course, one about an hour and a half ago, and 3 more just within the last 10 minutes or so we're seen going up the gangway carrying suitcases. In addition to those who are actually arriving here, those that are on board, of course, are free to leave anytime they like, and there are regular bus services shuttling them to places on Portland Island and across into Weymouth. So a number of those asylum seekers have been seen leaving the barge, leaving the port and heading off possibly towards Weymouth. So 19 so far, and we're expecting, I think, throughout the course of today there will be more arriving, but if it's anything like yesterday, it may be way short of what the original expectation was. We were told that it was going to be 50 who were arriving yesterday. In the end, it was only 15. As many of those, 20 of those, in fact, did not go on board the buses that were to take them here to Portland Harbour on the advice of lawyers and charities who had intervened on their behalf and said that for a variety of reasons it would have been cruel and inhumane to put these people on the barge. They've now been given letters, further notices from the Home Office, giving them a deadline really until the end of today to get on that barge, and if they don't get on the barge, the letter effectively says that they may well find themselves not receiving any Home Office support, and that might mean that they're homeless and destitute. I'm not quite sure where the Home Office would stand legally on that point, as it obviously is obliged by law to ensure that no asylum seeker is left destitute, but they have offered accommodation. If that accommodation is not taken up, then maybe perhaps that is a legal argument they could have.
It does sound like a bit of an empty threat. I can't imagine the Home Office would be able to just say, OK, well then, no support for you, you can be homeless. And that's not what Brits are going to want either, is it really? Lots of single men just sleeping on the streets who've just come off a dinghy
They could
in
do
the
that
channel.
for all 50,000. I mean, if they wanted, they could literally say, right, well, you're all either on the BB Stockholm or you're all homeless. Like, it's a ridiculous suggestion. It's never going to happen.
But maybe it's working. I mean, we've seen... Mark, I'm sorry if you're repeating yourself, but why has there been such a trickle? One here, one there, going onto the barge?
Well, I mean, they're coming from different hotels, a lot of them. So they wanted to do it in a sort of a process whereby it was an incremental process of putting people gradually on the barge. They didn't want 200 people, for instance, turning up at the same time. The processing then would be clearly under strain. There would be a logjam trying to get them on board. So they want to do it over a period of weeks, if not months, to get up to that 500 total figure. But I don't think anyone really expected that there would just be 1 or 2 people on these big coaches that are arriving. I think that is a byproduct of the advice that they are being given by the lawyers and the charities, saying, look, just don't get on these buses, because clearly if they were getting on the buses, it wouldn't just be a trickle of 1 or 2 or 3 going up the gangway. It would be, 10 at a time.
Mark, do we know where the people who are heading for the Bibi Stockholm are coming from specifically? Are they coming from the local area, or are they being bussed from all sorts of areas around the UK?
Well, I was told that the initial cohort are coming from hotels around Bournemouth, so not too far from here. And it makes sense, of course, that they would draw those asylum seekers from hotels in this local area to begin with, rather than bussing them from one end of the country to the other. So just like in Lincolnshire, when RAF Scampton is finally up and running, providing it gets through the judicial review process, it'll probably take people from that end of the country, as those from southeast England are likely to go to Wethersfield in Essex.
OK, thank you, Mark. Mark White there, down at Portland, counting them on one by one.
I want to know what's stopping them from absconding.
What, once they're on the boat?
Yeah, leave the boat for the day and don't come back.
Well, the thing is, they don't want to be, as we joke about being made homeless, they don't want to be homeless. They want to have residency. They want to have citizenship.
No, but they'll
so
have
that
friends
they
who
can
are living
work.
elsewhere around the country that they can go and live with.
But then they won't be able to work and make money, you see.
We have quite a big black market.
Which Suella Braverman is trying to clamp down on.
True.
So some ways, when you follow these little routes, sometimes you do see little glimmers of hope.
What a mess.
Tiny. Right, still to come, Britons want their killer American XL bully breed banned. Some do, a new poll has found. Don't go anywhere.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com. You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nana, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the people's channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
It is coming up to 11:25 in the morning. You're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News with me, Emily Carver, and Bev Turner.
So a bit of breaking news for you now. A man has been arrested on suspicion of causing grievous bodily harm after a man was stabbed close to the British Museum. The Met Police have said this morning. We are sending a reporter to the scene.
Yes, we'll keep you up to date on that. So, moving on. Britain's back a ban on the killer American XL bully dog breed. That's according to polling exclusively seen by GB News.
That's right. The YouGov report claims that dog attacks surged from 16,000 5 years ago to 22,000 last year. So we're joined in the studio now by GB News investigates reporter Charlie Peters, who's obtained this polling. Hello, Charlie. Tell us a little bit more about it. That's such shocking numbers of how many dog attacks there are in this country every year.
They've risen significantly, and this breed, the American Bully XL, is reported to be associated with a significant rise in that jump. We know that it's associated with 11 confirmed deaths since 2021 and 3 suspected human deaths, and that's just people, of course. But in terms of attacks on pets, that's a significantly higher number.
Right.
An online tracker called Bully Watch, which takes a look at this particular breed, found last week that there was a different pet killed every day by one of these breeds. And
Gosh. Can we just get a picture of one if we've got one, just so people know exactly what they look like? They do look a bit like little bruisers, don't they?
Well, they're
terrifying-looking dogs.
They're bred
There they are.
They're bred through with pit bulls, and pit bulls are banned under the Dangerous Dogs Act of 1991. But these American Bully XLs have been allowed to be retained in Britain due to a bit of a loophole by the fact that they're crossbred with them. And because the breeding stock is so small, there's a lot of inbreeding, and some of the violent characteristics innate in this breed are more readily produced through the breeding process. So it's no surprise that when YouGov collected this sample of 2,000 Britons, it found that 57% are in favour of a ban and just 17% against. When you break it down by political association, we found that 69% of Conservative voters also backed the ban and 67% of Brexiteers. So a very popular call.
Conservatives and Brexiteers are more likely to want to ban.
Sorry to laugh on such a serious issue, but what relevance is it as to what people's politics are, whether they want to ban a dangerous dog? What does that tell us?
Well, you know, people always check polling and policy by virtue of which parties vote for what. You have it for ULEZ, you have it for climate change. You'll also have it for the very pertinent issue of dangerous dogs. I mean, we know that these are killing people and also killing dogs, and so people are very alert to the risk, and especially with that reported increasing rise in attacks from 2018 to 2021. And also it comes in quite a lot of political debate as well, because we know that the policing minister, Chris Philip, he thinks that there's a big issue with this problem, but we also know that the Environment Minister, Lord Benyon, said last week that there were no plans for the government to add this Bully XL breed to the Dangerous Dogs Act.
Because these dogs are, well, symbols of status among some people. Rappers, some athletes, social media influencers, am I right?
Yes, and they're incredibly expensive as well.
Yeah.
They are a luxury item. A Bully XL, if you look online, they'll go for thousands and thousands of pounds. It is not like getting a Labrador or a Retriever or a Terrier. These are luxury designer dogs, according to many of the people who sell them. And you can find their pages on Instagram, and they do go for quite a hefty price.
So who are the people who fight for them to be allowed to remain? Who's that contingent?
Well, it's a broad range. So many critics of people calling for a ban include the RSPCA, who think there should be a non-breed specific approach to banning.
Really?
Yes, I mean, we'll hear from them later on the programme.
But so even though these Bully XLs are killing other animals every week, the RSPCA thinks that we should still have them.
Well, I imagine they'll put out their position later. But as I understand it, they have a sort of they don't assess dangerous dogs by breed. They think it's more of an owner-related concern. That seems to be the position they hold, and that's also the position you hear from many of the owners of these dogs. They think that the problem isn't the breed, but rather the owners and the people who bring them out to fight.
Can a dog be born bad? I think that they probably can, but that's very controversial these days to say that. Most people want to blame the owners.
Yes, indeed. And when you look on, if you look on the list of dog attacks in Britain, if you do the search function on your laptop, Control F, type in Labrador, you'll get 0 results. But type in Bully XL, you'll get rather a lot. So a lot of science does seem to suggest that there is a concern associated with the traits bred into these bullies and what they get up to.
Well done for raising awareness of it, Charlie. Particularly as someone who has children who loves dogs, I am always nervous when I go out with them in parks because they want to run over and pat every dog, and it makes me really, really
You're just nervous anyway, aren't you?
And I'm just terrified
dogs.
of all dogs, full stop. I'm terrified of, like, tiny little chihuahuas. I'm not even joking.
My brother was terrified as a child. He probably still is. He ran, you know, across a park to get away from one dog. And what happens then? They follow you.
Chases you. I know that by experience. And in fact, somebody has written a very long email to the show telling me about their fear of dogs. I'm so sorry, I haven't had time to read it all yet, but I will. So thank you very much. Email us on this topic as well, won't you? gbviews@gbnews.com is the email address.
.com.
.com, thank you. First of all, though, here is your very latest news with Ray Addison.
It's 11:30. Here's the latest and some breaking news as we've been hearing in the last few minutes. The Met Police says a man has been arrested on suspicion of causing grievous bodily harm after a man was stabbed close to the British Museum in London. Reports say the museum has been evacuated. The GB News reporter is on their way to the scene. We will bring you more on this story as we get it. Now, more asylum seekers have been seen boarding the Bibby Stockholm barge. These pictures seen a few moments ago show 3 people joining the 16 men already on board. Around 20 asylum seekers did not board the vessel as planned yesterday after their transfers were cancelled due to legal challenges. Meanwhile, a new task force to root out so-called dodgy lawyers has been announced by the government. It follows reports in the Daily Mail that solicitors helped an undercover journalist posing as an economic migrant to submit a false application in exchange for thousands of pounds. Home Secretary Suella Braverman saying that rogue firms are con men who must face the full force of the law. A haulage firm that's part of one of the UK's largest transport groups may be forced to shut down its site in Northern Ireland due, it says, to Brexit. GB News has seen a letter sent by Morgan McLernan to staff that blames the consequences of post-Brexit arrangements for possible redundancies. The company delivers to every major UK supermarket. Well, the number of bus services in the UK has halved since 2011. That's according to analysis by Labour. They found that there were nearly 9,000 in the year to March. That's down from nearly 18,000 in 2011. However, the government's saying that Labour's criticism is misleading as it's invested £3.5 billion into bus services since 2020. You can get more on all of those stories by visiting our website, gbnews.com. Now let's get straight back to Emily and Bev.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, Alex Deacon here with your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. It will warm up over the next couple of days. Today, a bit of a north-south split with dull and damp conditions in the south, something a bit brighter further north, but it's very windy in the far north thanks to this deep area of low pressure named Storm Hans by the Norwegian Weather Service, bringing some wet and windy conditions to Scandinavia. The low pressure affecting us isn't as intense, it's just making for a fairly damp day over parts of the Midlands, South Wales. And after a miserly start, it might get a little brighter in the southwest. That light rain and drizzle spreading to East Anglia and the southeast. Yorkshire, Lancashire, Northern Ireland and a good chunk of Scotland actually having a fine day, dry and bright, but it is very windy in the far northeast with gales at times across Shetland. Temperature-wise, well, high teens, low 20s at best. Now, the cloud and rain and drizzle could pep up a little bit through this evening. Could see some heavier bursts of rain across Essex and towards London for a time, but it all clears away. Most places become dry overnight. A stiff wind across the far northeast continues, but elsewhere the winds fall light. And it does turn quite chilly, actually, rural spots down into single figures. But most of us will have a warmer Wednesday, and for many it'll be a fine day too, with plenty of sunshine. Quite cloudy in West Wales and Northern Ireland, where there will be some light rain and drizzle at times. Quite cloudy also for parts of Devon and Cornwall, and clouding over in southwest Scotland. But many central and eastern parts staying fine. Turning a bit warmer tomorrow, warmer still on Thursday.
That warm feeling inside. From boxed boilers. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Still to come, a man has gone on strike, hunger strike against ULEZ. I mean, I feel strongly about it, but I'm not sure I feel that strongly. And you will not believe the company that has told its employees to stop working from home and get back into the office. Don't go anywhere. This is Britain's Newsroom.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Weeknights on GB News from 6 p.m. You'll always get drama.
Please stop, Michelle.
I know, yeah.
Please stop.
Should I just shut up?
Romance.
You like me, I like you. There you go.
There you are. Well, don't tell anybody.
Adventure.
Etc.
That's the whole point. But
yeah. And action.
Sergeant, read my superstar panel. They're already at it. They're fighting. It's going to be quite a show.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often there will be difficult stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Bev Turner and Emily Carver this morning. Let's get straight into our stories with our panel. Dawn Neeson is here and Nigel Nelson. Right, a gentleman has gone on hunger strike over ULEZ. I mean, look, I feel very, very strongly that ULEZ expansion is a terrible idea, but this guy's taken it to another level, Dawn.
He's on hunger strike camping outside a tube station.
Oxbridge tube station,
yeah.
So what was Boris Johnson's constituency?
Look, I can understand how people do feel very strongly about it. I think this is probably a bit extreme, but at least it's got us talking about it, Bev, which is important, because I think we do, because, you know, a lot of businesses will, you know, small businesses, as we discussed earlier on, people driving the white vans will be put out of business by then. You can't afford to, you know, £2,000 scrappage, it's nothing. You can't afford to update your cars. So a lot of people very strongly, as the Uxbridge by-election proved, which was basically a referendum, wasn't it, on the green issues. So I can't actually blame him. I think it's a bit much, maybe, but, you know, the irony is of where he's doing it. Obviously, Heathrow's just down the road from this constituency, and it's like, or even in the constituency, and it's like you've got big ULEZ signs around Heathrow.
Well, there he is on the screen in a Stop ULEZ T-shirt. Pradeep Singh, he's 40 years old. He served in the Royal Army Dental Corps. He seems to find the fact that it's being imposed. That's the sticking point.
Yeah, I mean,
imposed at a time of cost of living.
No harm with objecting to it, no harm with protesting. I think that Dawn's absolutely right. This is a bit extreme. Normally you go on a hunger strike because you want someone to be released. So, I mean, Richard Radcliffe, when Nazanin was in Iran, was being an example. Or if you are yourself in prison and you're on hunger strike in protest against something, this doesn't feel like the issue that is suitable for a hunger strike.
No.
Well, maybe it is for him. Maybe he's hearing from friends, family, who are really going to struggle as a result of this imposition. And I think it's that undemocratic nature. You know, these consultations are ignored. Anyone who says they don't like it is ignored and, you know,
wasn't the
demonised even.
Wasn't the implication, Emily, at one point by people that were sort of like, you know, implying that people protesting against ULEZ were far right?
Well, yes,
that was the
there
BBC.
Was that.
The BBC has to apologise for
and
that.
And now Sadiq Khan's latest line, I must say, is that tradesmen, it's in their interests, so it's in the interests of your local plumber, your local construction worker, for ULEZ to go ahead, so that they take fewer days off for asthma-related conditions.
I did ask you to get in touch if that is one of these people. I'm not sure we've had anybody in the inbox yet, funnily enough. You're right, Sadiq Khan has said, I am unwilling to delay, water down or step back from these important measures that are going to save lives and protect lungs. There's no evidence, Nigel, that they're going to protect lungs. That's the bit that bothers me.
Well, there is a lot of evidence that it would actually make the air cleaner in London. And I think they mentioned the undemocratic bit. I mean, the only undemocratic bit are the people outside London who are affected, who never had a chance to vote for Sadiq Khan and therefore this policy.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Right, let's move on to a story that, well, I caught wind of actually on social media, but it's a brilliant one. It is a story of our time, in my view. So Neo, I don't know if you may have heard of him. No. He's a popular singer. He sang some fantastic songs. I won't bore you with my rendition.
What's the one we'd know?
True. But, oh no, sorry, I'm gonna stop that. But anyway, he appeared on a podcast and he said what he thought about something, and it happened to be about children transitioning to another gender. He came out quite strongly and said he doesn't approve of it, basically. Then what happened was this apology appeared. I think we've got it on the screen. This apology appeared on his Twitter account, saying, what does it say, Bev? It says, After much reflection, I'd like to express my deepest apologies to anyone that I may have hurt with my comments on parenting and gender identity. He goes on to say, I plan to better educate myself on the topic so I can approach future conversations with more empathy. Now, it turns out that actually he wants to stick by his guns. Let's have a look at his new video.
First and foremost, I do not apologize for having an opinion on this matter. I am a 43-year-old heterosexual man raising 5 boys and 2 girls, okay? That's my reality. Now, if my opinion offended somebody, yeah, sure, I apologize for you being offended because that wasn't my intention. My intention is never to offend anybody. However, I'm entitled to feel how I feel. I'm absolutely entitled to feel how I feel the same way you are entitled to feel how you feel. I ain't asked nobody to follow me. I ain't asked nobody to agree with me. I was asked a question, and I answered the damn question, okay?
So interesting. It is such a tale of our times, because part of also what he said is that this statement was generated by a publicist's computer, he said. What a mess, Nigel. When it comes to this topic of trans issues and gender identity, the people around him were obviously terrified that he'd said something wrong. And I like the fact that he's pulled back and said, no, I stand by it.
No, so do I. I don't agree with him, but I think it's absolutely right that you should express your opinion, whatever it might be. I mean, this channel believes in free speech. This is actually free speech. You shouldn't have people intervening and saying, oh, actually, this is not very good for your image or anything like that. I mean, the same thing happens to J.K. Rowling, that a museum in America doing an exhibition of Harry Potter pulled any reference to her out of that. You don't do that. She's part of the Harry Potter... Well, she is the Harry Potter story, really. So I'm never against... Although I disagree with these people, I'm never for them being cancelled or shut up. They shouldn't be.
Is it going to take people like this man, who's obviously incredibly popular with the young people on social media, to say, no, I won't be silenced. I will tell you what I believe in.
Why should anyone be silenced? Everybody is entitled to their opinion. I mean, I'm personally all about debate, not hate.
It's brave, though, isn't it?
It is, but the fact that that was a publicist's computer-generated apology?
Well, that's what he says.
He's sort of paraphrasing. What he's saying is, computer says, no, you're all robots.
It does sound like it does read like it's been written by ChatGPT.
Probably.
Say sorry for saying something offensive.
If that was your publicist, you'd sack them. You know, this is my opinion, I'm entitled to my opinion. If you don't like it, that's tough. I don't want to offend you,
but would you sack them? This is the thing. Would you sack them? Because as we've seen in the last 3 or 4 years, anybody that speaks out against controversial issues, there is one prevailing narrative. You get punished for it.
We shouldn't be, Bev. We really shouldn't. GB News is all about, as Nigel just said, freedom of speech. We can disagree with one another, but we agree to disagree with one another. Doesn't mean you have to get into a slanging match about it. You have the debate, and then actually, if you continually shut down debate and silence people and cancel people, nothing gets solved. Just more hatred.
Can you follow the thread back, Nigel, as to when and how the idea that free speech is bad started?
Yeah, and I follow it back actually to Brexit.
Do you?
This is not actually a criticism of Brexit. It is the fact that for the first time, people's votes counted. Every single vote in the country counted. At a general election, about 200,000 do in marginal seats. So I think people felt empowered, and as a result of that, they began to actually get more strident views, and arguments became more polarised. And in that polarisation, people got cancelled. But I would think I think it's Brexit that really started it.
I'm just so fed up of these cookie-cutter apologies. So it's just so refreshing to see a man stick to his guns, because this may impact brand deals going forward. This may lead to a lot of hate in his inbox, I imagine, because we know how much some trans activists can make their voices heard. But yes, it's refreshing. So that's why we drew attention to the story, really.
Yeah. Right, Dawn. Staff at university encouraged to ditch phrases black sheep, black ball, Indian summer. What?
It's not just people that are being cancelled, it's colours. I'm sorry, the word black is now racist. The colour black is racist. This is, where is it? The University of Surrey have been handed examples of non-inclusive words and phrases. Now, to be fair, it's not a university policy. This has come from the... where's it come from? The Mental Health First Aid Foundation. And they are saying that the word black is very often associated with negative phrases like blackmail, black sheep of the family, blackball, etc. And they are suggesting alternatives like you can't call someone a black sheep anymore, you have to call them a renegade.
Oh my God.
You can't use the word blackball anymore, you have to use the word ostracised.
There was only UK Finance, I think, last week put out inclusive guidelines saying that you can't use the word
black market.
Black market,
Yeah.
yes.
I was thinking about this one because often when you're writing, it's the best way of deciding whether you can use an alternative word. Yeah. So the alternative word for black market was going to be illegal market, and I don't think that quite covers it. No. Black market, you know exactly what it is.
Shadowy.
Yeah, that's right. An illegal market could be all sorts of things, from the market down the road that shouldn't have set up to actually selling things on the black market.
That's a very good point.
But it is a question of some words you can substitute. So, for instance, nowadays I would no longer write wheelchair bound, I would write wheelchair user. I tend to use the pronoun they for an individual. I find that it doesn't change the way you write. So
do you do that even if you know categorically whether you're writing about a man or a woman?
Yes.
Do you?
Yes. I've started doing it on the basis of people wanted that, you know, were quite forceful about what pronouns they wanted used. I tried it out and discovered that the they said rather than he said or she said actually worked.
But isn't that obfuscation? Because I would say in the same way that black market doesn't quite do the job, they doesn't do the job in a sentence. If I want to know whether you're talking about a man or a woman, I want to have that fact.
But you would have that in the previous paragraph. You would have named that person.
Hang on, we've had incidents where there have been trans rapists and they've used they, and we don't know if the person is transgender or if they're a woman or a man at birth. So you get confused over sex and gender when people don't just use the pronoun.
If they're a rapist or a man.
Yeah, exactly.
Because
if they don't use the biological sex. So,
sorry.
I mean, it just complicates matters.
We're talking about cancelling a colour. Where does it stop? I mean, white, OK? White is boring, OK? Black is much sexier, fashionable, stylish, etc., etc. You know, white elephant, you know? I mean, sort of like, you know...
You could say whitewash. Whitewash is a negative.
They're a bit negative. Yellow-bellied.
But I think also what I find so problematic about some of these conversations, and yes, language has to evolve, and yes, there are words that relate to race that we wouldn't ever use now in casual conversation. But doesn't it detract from genuine racism, genuine discrimination, if you're obsessing about a word used in a piece of prose as to whether the company employing the person to write that is discriminating against people in the workplace?
Talk to me about the black kid that's just been stabbed in the streets rather than whether I can say the word blackboard or not.
That's right.
I mean, I'm sorry, this is just complete deflection of the real issues we need to be tackling.
There's so much of it, though, isn't there?
There is a lot. Right. Now, we called you earlier, Nigel, that you are the Kennedy in the room today with the 3 Barbie dolls. Barbie has become the biggest film to be directed by a solo woman to surpass the $1 billion mark. Dawn, have you seen it?
Yes, I have, and I absolutely hated it. I'm sorry.
Did you? I haven't seen it, and maybe this conversation talking about a movie, if you haven't seen it, is a bit boring. I apologise.
Look, it's basically, it's like a 2-hour advert for Barbie and all the stuff that goes with Barbie, including the Ken doll.
But isn't it, doesn't it, but it's about gender politics as well, isn't it?
Well, it is and it isn't. Now, in my world, feminism is about equality between the sexes, OK? So I view our, you know,
equality
men and
of
women
opportunity
as equal. But Barbie, in Barbie world, the men are just like, you know, like women used to be, Bev, and I don't think that's right. Absolutely, they are just like token gestures, really.
But isn't the denouement of the movie? I haven't seen it, but I've gone. Isn't it that at the end they're all equal?
No, because the Barbies are still in control, and Ken is still a spare part, shall we say?
Is that right?
Although he hasn't got any parts.
Well, as the honorary Ken here this morning, I haven't seen the film. I have no intention of seeing the film. I can't imagine anything
Oh, what
worse.
a boy you are! What a boy you are, Nigel. We must tell everyone which company it is that...
Oh, yes. This is a great story. So, this is a company that has told everybody, stop working from home, we need you back in the office. It's Zoom. Zoom. It's brilliant, isn't it? Nigel, what do you make of it?
Well, it's very funny for a start.
It's very funny.
On the basis that especially a company that's set up specifically so you can work from home are saying that they must come back. In fact, they're being told to come back for 2 days a week, and the idea is they will then interact with the workforce in a much better way. personally, I think it's quite sensible. If you can work from home, work from home. I do think that you need to go into the office at least once a week, twice a week to meet colleagues. I don't think you need to be there 5 days a week. COVID has changed the way we work, and things are much better for it.
This is such a middle-class confection, isn't it? Because it's like middle class has got nice, comfortable office jobs, nice homes in the home counties where they've got space and Wi-Fi, etc., who are happy working from home. Whereas the working class jobs, the people delivering the pizzas, collecting the rubbish from these people, they can't work from home.
I mean, nor can TV presenters. You two couldn't work from home.
Well, I could if I had my own studio.
You could, actually.
Well, the thing is, ironically, we did, of course, during lockdowns. I did nothing but Zoom down the lens.
Oh, God, it was
for a while.
so depressing.
But it's so much nicer to be here in a studio with actual human beings. It's lovely.
She can't sort out my hair in the breaks if we're at home.
But, you know, I don't do that to Andrew Pearce, I can tell you. But, you know, I do think a combination of both is good, don't you, Dawn, on the whole?
No, I actually think people should go back to work. I'm sorry.
Do you?
I think it's good for young people who are learning, certainly on newspapers, which is my business. I've worked in all my life, and I think unless you're in the office and you're working with more experienced colleagues, you're never going to learn. You can't learn to do so many jobs via...
One day at home, maybe Monday, hangover Monday, they can work from home.
You speak for yourself, young lady. Hangovers on a Monday.
Don't get drunk on a Sunday.
Right, Dawn Newsroom, Nigel Nelson, thank you very much. And Emily, thank you. It's been lovely having you here today.
Thank you for having me.
That is it for Britain's... We're very polite, aren't we? That's it for Britain's Newsroom today. Up next, it's the live desk with Tom Harwood and Pip, and they are here to tell us what's coming up. What have you got, guys?
Hello there. Lots to come over the next 3 hours, including this developing story, a stabbing near the British Museum. We do understand that people have been evacuated and there are reports that the museum could be completely closed. We'll be updating you.
And more than that, the Home Secretary has declared war on corrupt immigration lawyers. As the first migrants enter the Bibby Stockholm, we'll be exploring exactly what that war involves and how it will affect us. That's all to come on the live desk after the weather forecast. See you in a moment.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, Alex Deacon here with your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. It will warm up over the next couple of days. Today, a bit of a north-south split with dull and damp conditions in the south, something a bit brighter further north, but it's very windy in the far north thanks to this deep area of low pressure named Storm Hans by the Norwegian Weather Service, bringing some wet and windy conditions to Scandinavia. The low pressure affecting us isn't as intense. It's just making for a fairly damp day over parts of the Midlands, South Wales. And after a miserly start, it might get a little brighter in the southwest. That light rain and drizzle spreading to East Anglia and the southeast. Yorkshire, Lancashire, Northern Ireland and a good chunk of Scotland actually having a fine day, dry and bright, but it is very windy in the far northeast with gales at times across Shetland. Temperature-wise, well, high teens, low 20s at best. Now, the cloud and rain and drizzle could pep up a little bit through this evening. Could see some heavier bursts of rain across Essex and towards London for a time, but it all clears away. Most places become dry overnight. A stiff wind across the far northeast continues, but elsewhere the winds fall light. And it does turn quite chilly, actually, rural spots down into single figures. But most of us will have a warmer Wednesday, and for many it'll be a fine day too, with plenty of sunshine. Quite cloudy in West Wales and Northern Ireland, where there will be some light rain and drizzle at times. Quite cloudy also for parts of Devon and Cornwall, and clouding over in southwest Scotland. But many central and eastern parts staying fine. Turning a bit warmer tomorrow, warmer still on Thursday.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.